Wayne kind of panicked me this morning. He sent me the scripture on my cell phone. And that's why I have readers here this morning. I don't see real well. But he saved me. He printed it out in big letters. So the reading this morning is from Acts 17, verses 26 through 28. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God in the hope that they might feel their way toward him and find him. Yet he is actually not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As even some of your own poets have said, for we are indeed his offspring.
Thank you, Roger, for that reading. Good morning, church. Glad you're here. Let's get our Bibles out and say this together as we start out, all right? This is my Bible. It contains God's will for my life. I can become what it says I can become. Today, I will study from his word. My mind is alert. My heart is receptive. I'll never again be the same. Amen. If you've ever been to Athens, if you have a chance to go there, there's a place there referred to as Mars Hill, of course, in Acts 17. And if you get up on top of that, you can see a 360-degree radius. As you look down below all of the remains of temples, maybe 75 temples. And that's what Paul saw that said in the beginning of the chapter that it moved his spirit when he saw all of these false gods. But they have in a little bronze plaque inside a rock there, Paul's statement in Acts chapter 17. It's worth seeing if you go there. I want to read a little more of that text. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to dispute with him. Some of them ask, what is this babbler saying? Others remark, he seems to be advocating foreign gods. They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, may we know what this new teaching is that you're presenting? You're bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we want to know what they mean. All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, men of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at the objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. Now, what you worship as something unknown, I'm going to proclaim to you. Our world is changing rapidly. This hill that Paul, I said that because that's the sermon topic. All right, I'll come back in a second. This hill that Paul was on, it was a meeting place of the council. And this body, this supreme body, they were in charge of the education and religious matters. Paul's antagonists were Epicurean and Stoic philosophers. Who were they? Well, the Epicureans believed man's chief aim was pleasure and happiness in life. That's what you were to devote your life to and nothing else. And the Stoics, well, their greatest purpose was directing history. So they were going to tell you how that you could have pleasure. When I read that, I thought it reminds me a little bit about today. The family, especially the Christian family, is under a serious attack. We've been under attack for a long time. But it has grown exponentially in the last few years. It's interesting. It used to be the Da Vinci Code, or it used to be inaccuracies of the Bible, or pushing of a gay agenda, or making fun of people who believed in the Bible, but now stops have been pulled out. And they no longer speak positively. There was a time in which the world appreciated the church. They even valued their beliefs and their opinions. But that's not the case anymore. I want to go back and look at a time of those today in our culture who are working as hard as they can to destroy what's left of the moral fabric of America. H.R. Lewis wrote a book called Excellence Without a Soul. He said this. He talks about the American universities who were at one time were an envy of the world. None of those any more greater than Harvard. All of those universities initially were associated with the Bible, some of them linked to different denominations. And they understood their fundamental purpose, at least as far as undergraduate work is concerned, was to turn out adults who could think and weigh things and have a positive response to society. That's been a long time ago. That's probably a half a century, more than a half a century ago. First, dentistry was painless, then bicycles were chainless, and carriages were horseless, and many laws enforceless. Next, cookery was fireless, telegraphy was wireless, cigars were nicotineless, coffee caffeineless. Soon oranges were seedless, the putting green was weedless, the proper diet fatless. New motor roads were dustless, the latest steel was rustless. Our tennis courts were sodless, our new religion godless. There came a time a couple decades ago, maybe more, when definitions of words and thought were used improperly. There was no perspective that you could gain from that. I'm not talking about what happens today when they actually take a word and try to totally change the definition. It was more chaos, but it was the beginning of the secular movement. What is secularism? It is a view that religious considerations should be excluded from civil affairs and public education. Some of you may be old enough to have gone to a one-room schoolhouse where they taught 2 or 3 grades in one room. And maybe, just maybe, you were old enough to realize that some of them even used a Bible as a textbook. But people enjoyed and they fell madly in love with the idea of having a secular society and a secular government. But in terms of moral values and ethics, in terms of what would result from that, nobody really checked out what secularism proposes and assumes. Beginning in the 1960s, the desire to wholeheartedly embrace secularism led to the the society's loss of innocence. God explains that in their innocence, speaking of Adam and Eve, in their innocence, before they invited sin into the world, Adam and Eve were naked and unashamed. The decline of shame can be traced to the death of the notion of obscenity, to the death of art. We want all art to be, regardless of what it depicts, we want the freedom of the art to be paramount. By the time the courts had agreed that obscenity was dead, they had killed something that helped to maintain the health of a society. The ability to distinguish between what is good and what is evil. Once you accept secularism, next comes pluralization, which you have a great number of competing worldviews of religion. Up until this time in America, there had basically been religion of Christianity and Jews. That was pretty much it. But now all worldviews are out there for you to make a choice, like you're going to a buffet. Different worldviews begin to bubble to the top. Beliefs about the unseen. Before that, everything was concrete. Everything was absolute. But now, well, what about the things that are unseen? The things we don't know about? How do they fit into our life? What is it that's not really important? Or does anything really matter, or anything concrete, anything worth dying for? Whatever worldview you have, that worldview will shape everything you think about. It will affect and influence every facet of your life. The only thing we can be sure of in a secular society is all moral choices are relative. There's no absolutes. There's no point of saying this is right and this is wrong. You can't do that. The result is the death of reason. There was no more discussion. Well, let's take in this into consideration, and let's take this, and let's reach some kind of conclusion. Once having been decided that secularism and pluralization are the law, once that becomes the norm of the accepted secular society, then what does society do with a huge number of people who are spiritually minded? I mean, this group says there is a right and a wrong. There's good things and bad things. There's things you should do and you shouldn't do. What do you do with that group? Well, you privatize them. Spiritually minded people are able to be spiritually minded people as long as they keep their beliefs to themselves. You can say what you want to say, you can think what you want to say, but don't say it, just shut your mouth. So the three states of mind, it could even be moods, it could be emotions. But let's just stick with the three states of mind. Secularization, remove everything spiritual from the powers of society and the good. Pluralization, making available all of the worldviews, those you never even heard of or dreamed of before. Privatization. You know, if you believe in absolute truth, it's okay for you to believe in that absolute truth. Just don't open your mouth and say that to anybody. So these three laws, as they become, gave society the space that it needed to expel morality, to push it out of the government, to push morality out of the norms of society. That resulted in political correctness. Political correctness is a process of speaking without offending anyone. That's the goal of political correctness. You say what you say, but you say it in mind that you don't offend any single person. Now, there's a few voices that are in charge of culture. We'll talk about this maybe next week. Romans chapter 1, Paul talks there about people who are so wise, they're just super wise. They think they're the smartest people in the world, and they're really dumb. But there's a few elite people at the top of a society, and they're allowed to speak. And what they say, we simply repeat. We just repeat it again and again. As a result, everything in a secular society becomes pragmatic. Now, I want to look at pragmatism from two standpoints. First of all, what is pragmatism? Well, let's define it by looking at a pragmatic person. They're interested in the practical solution of problems. Good. They want a solution that's efficient, a solution that's economical. They want to get the job done in nuts and bolts. When I was going to Pepperdine in the summertime, I worked as a brake and front end mechanic. And the boss used to come over to me and say, "See the job?" "Yes, sir." "Do you know how to do it?" "Yes, sir." "Then get it done." That's the idea. A pragmatic person, they want to go from A to B and get the job done. Who doesn't? We all like for our gadgets to run. You know, when your phone doesn't work or doesn't give you your message, you're frustrated. Or what if we went to the airport and they said, we're not really sure when your flight will be in. I mean, it could be, it's scheduled, but it's just not here. When pragmatism becomes a philosophy, it becomes utilitarian in nature. Utilitarian does not consider values such as justice and individual rights. If you had 4 people in a bed, let's say they needed a heart and lungs and kidneys and a liver. There's 4 people and they need those or they're going to die. And you happen to walk into the hospital and you're young and healthy and someone says, heart, lungs, liver, kidney, you die that the majority may live. That's utilitarianism. Another major problem with this belief is the idea of personal opinion. We might agree that we want the greatest good for our society, but who decides what the greatest good is? I mean, think about it. How do you decide? There are as many opinions as there are people, right? So how do you choose what's right and what's wrong? Without some external criteria, something outside of ourselves, who is going to make the call? Classic utilitarianism developed in the American society in the 17th and 18th centuries. Remember, during those times, they were living very much on the Judeo-Christian system of beliefs. And even though a lot of the philosophers at the time totally rejected Christianity, they assumed that the moral values taught by Christianity was true and it was good and it was useful. But are those assumptions valid? You have a group of people that says, I don't want anything to do with Christianity, but yeah, I'll go along with their moral values. Now that's 200 years ago. We might want the greatest good for the greatest number, but who decides what's good and who decides who gets to make that choice? The result is we've lost all the definitions of what it means to be human. What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? We've lost what sexuality is. I saw a person that's just about to be sworn in as in the highest court in the land, and they asked her, "Can you define a man and a woman?" Slip what I wanted to say. Can you define a woman? And she said, "No." What is life? What is our purpose for being here on earth? We didn't get here by accident. Surely it's not an accident that we live through life and just an accident we disappear. What about the home? Is the home important? Is it good for a home to have a mother and a father giving their values and loving children and caring? Or is it best to remove one or both parents and just have the people in here to do what they choose in life? That's the current plan. What is God like? How can I come to understand who he is? Maybe I don't think much of him, but maybe if I got to know God, maybe that would change my way of thinking. The shift that's taken place in today's society regarding Christianity is extremely well orchestrated and thought out. Now, Eastern religions are protected from the abuse that the Christian religion gets. By the way, I don't feel like a martyr this morning. I hope I'm not making you feel like a martyr. I just want us to understand what's happening in our society. For example, if you were to talk about something about an Eastern religion in a negative way, they say, well, you're insensitive, or you're politically incorrect, or maybe you're just a racist. Well, I thought political correctness is the process of speaking without offending anyone. That means anyone but Christianity. Again, you're not allowed to think this, but the Christian faith, the largest group under attack in the Western world, came from where? It came from right smack dab in the Middle East. Now, if it should occur to you to think these things and to express these things and say, wait a minute, you may be looking at Christianity and thinking it's a Western religion, we should be under attack. But remember, we're from the East. You can think that, but you can't say it. So you privatize that soldier. You keep it in the right place in your mind. We need to remember that the Judeo-Christian worldview is also the target of our media in America. The media is the greatest enabler. The media is the greatest destroyer of absolutes. So let's back up a couple of steps. Why attack the Christian worldview? Because Christians are viewed as holding society back. So how does that work? I mean, do we have pitchforks and machetes and we're going through whacking and chopping and stabbing and hacking people? No. Do we normally go up and slap people and get in their face? No. Then why the attack? Why are we being viewed as that which holds back society from moving forward. Because even though they don't want to hear our truth, they want us to have allegiance to their belief. The one thing that the world, the secular world, does not have is the endorsement of Christianity for their behavior. And that drives them nuts. They have all the laws. They're protected by all the laws. They're protected by even more laws. And yet Christianity has got to go because it is a threat. That same media, that same secular society is blind. That's what sin does. Now, if you said to them, you know, you're blind and you're following a God, stop. I don't go to church anywhere, man. I've never been in a church. Yeah, but maybe you have become your own God, or maybe the belief of the secular society has become the law of that God. Because the God who created man and breathed into him the breath of life said this, and even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled only to those who are perishing. In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. It's one thing to have no eyesight, to be blind. It's quite another thing, even more significant, to have a blinded mind. To have a mind as though you had some kind of maybe wrapped in tinfoil and you never got any information in or out and you couldn't think about it. It's veiled only to the perishing. So morality is a thorn in the side of the secular world. How do you get rid of that thorn? Well, it's simple. You make Jesus appear in some way immoral, or you lean toward the idea, well, there's a possibility he could be immoral. If you were able to do that and people were able to buy into that, well, that'd be the end. Books like the Da Vinci Code, the Gospel of Judas, the Gospel of Philip, a ton of these, they were designed to be used for that argument. You think Dan Brown's the Da Vinci Code. He'll get on and talk about how great this Jesus is. There's nobody like him. And then he'll say, you know, I mean, Jesus was really fond of Martha. Maybe they had an affair. Maybe something was going on. And maybe, I mean, if they had an affair, maybe they have a little baby somewhere. The purpose is to cast doubt, not so much on this group, but the group outside that may be leaning one way or the other in the secular society. So these, quote, newly discovered writings, which are not new in the way, are intended to show Jesus had some moral issues. And if they can get people to buy into this, well, that's good for them. I find it extremely telling. It's amazing to me that as they began to look into Christianity, they never go to the Quran to examine the life of Muhammad. They never go to the Gita, which is the Bhagavad Gita, which is the 700 verses of the Hindu religion, most important in the world. By the way, the Hindu religion doesn't have a founder. It came from this philosophy, this important, this person, and they put it all together and they go, we got the right stuff. But you'll never find them going to those 700 most precious verses, the Bhagavad Gita, and you don't go there for looking moral flaws. Instead, they attack the Christ in the Bible. He is so clean, so pure. I mean, even those in his day who interacted with him, those who hated him, believed that what he said and did was right. There was never any question about the morality of Jesus. He was always way above the fray. And they liked that even though they hated him. Why is the deity of Christ under attack? If you can make Jesus look like they want him to look, or like the Jesus they hope he will look, then you've taken away secularism's problem. Because Jesus is the ultimate authority. Now, I laid this all out to you this morning, and I want you to know there's more to come, but I'll shift gears a little bit. I wanted to just give us a little bit of background to see why this is happening, why we're where we are today. And in your handouts that you'll use this evening in your life groups, I went to creative work, I wrote a paper. And on that, I think it'll be very helpful. If you've had a handout today, that'll be good. But the other one is very much different, and that'll be useful. So I want to end where we began. In chapter 17, verse 21, all the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talk about and listening to the latest ideas. So, do the latest ideas, do they build you up? Do the latest ideas encourage you and help you when you're depressed? Do the latest ideas and things that spin around in society, do they help you become a better person? Do they help your family life? No. Only Jesus Christ can help your life. He can wash away your sins. He can have the Holy Spirit move inside you. He can walk with you every day of life through every process. And he'll do it. He came to die to have the right to do that. He came that he might live in us, free us from our sin, and say, I want to live in you as my holy temple. Wow. It doesn't get better than that. I don't know if Jesus is part of your life or not. If he's not, and you know what you need to do, we're going to sing a song to encourage you to do that. If you just don't understand, you don't get it at all, or you're confused, talk to one of us. We'd like to share tell you, this is what Jesus has done for me. He has changed my life and our lives so much, and we're so much better. We're going to sing a song of invitation. If we can serve you, let us know.
To Jesus for the cleansing power, are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you